challenge the gods, humanity built titans of steel, but they forgot the oldest god of all was the one beneath their feet. We built monuments to defy the sky, stitching continents together with steel. It only took a moment for the Earth to reclaim its own. He was the only man to escape the planet's pull, only to become a prisoner of the sky, the last witness to a world he could never go home to. What happens when the sky itself rejects the very concept of flight? To stand tall was once the definition of man. What do we become when the world no longer allows it? For 10,000 years, we lived with a single assumption, that the ground was a constant, a fatal assumption. It began not with a bang, but with a whisper, a subtle change in a universal law, a tremor in the fabric of reality. We measured our greatness by how high we could leap, how far we could soar. It was the peak of our defiance. And then, in less than a second, the fundamental rule of existence was rewritten. The sky had spoken its first brutal command: what goes up must come down. Hard. Every sidewalk became a minefield, every stumble a potential death sentence. The simplest acts of love, of protection, became feats of impossible strength. Our metal shells, once symbols of safety and freedom, instantly became our coffins. We thought we had conquered the darkness, but we never imagined it would be the weight of light itself that would extinguish it. The laws of nature are not suggestions, and on this day, they were being ruthlessly enforced. Even the giants of the earth, who had stood for centuries, were forced to their knees. The oceans, once a cradle of life, became a battering ram, pulled by an unseen, angry hand. The enemy didn't need to break down our walls. It attacked from within, turning our very heartbeats against us. Our wings of steel, our greatest ambition, were rendered useless. The dream of Icarus died, this time for everyone. The machines that lifted us to the heavens became the fastest way down. In mere minutes, Homo sapiens, the upright man, forgot how to stand. The tools we used to build our world became the instruments of its demolition. The veins of our civilization, carrying the fire of our power, hemorrhaged and died. The true horror was not what fell from the sky, but the realization that the very ground was rising up to crush us. And so began the symphony of collapse, played on an orchestra of concrete and steel. Our towers of Babel, built to touch the heavens, were pulled down by the very world they sought to escape. Civilization did not die in fire and fury. It died in a slow, grinding groan of failing architecture. The immense power we had tamed and caged was now breaking free. Nature was not just taking back the land, it was taking it back with twice the force. From space, it was a subtle change, a planet pulling its atmospheric blanket just a little tighter. For those below, it was the lid of a pressure cooker. The gate to the stars was not just closed, it was bricked over, the gravity well now too deep to ever escape. Even our havens in the heavens were not safe. They were simply the last to fall. They were fighting a war against a foe with no army, no weapon, only an immutable, relentless pull. To look upon your home and see not a beacon of life, but a planetary-scale graveyard. They were the luckiest of all, and they were the most cursed, sentenced to watch it all burn from an unreachable shore. The planet's crust, groaning under the new pressure, awakened the sleeping giants within. There is no running, no hiding, not even in the deepest, darkest parts of the world. the sum of human knowledge, crushed under the weight of its own paper and wood. The first hour, the end of the noise, the beginning of the wait. The age of man, the age of ambition and skyward reach was over. The age of gravity had begun. When standing is a luxury, crawling becomes an art form. In this new world, bone and muscle were currency. Weakness was a terminal illness. The children born into the wait would never know a bouncing ball. They learned the new, harsh physics from birth. Physics was no longer a subject in a book. It was the literal scripture of survival. Life, as it always does, found a way, not in the sun, but in the deep, tenacious darkness. The first crisis of the New World was not famine or war. It was an engineering problem, with the fate of the species as the variable. To fight the crushing weight of a planet, you must first build a skeleton strong enough to withstand it. They were not soldiers marching to war. They were architects, descending into hell to repair its foundation. Their journey was not outwards to the stars, but inwards to the very heart of the disaster. With every meter they descended, their enemy grew stronger. The path to salvation would not be found. It would be forged in fire and force. The old myths spoke of titans holding up the sky. The new myth would be of men holding up the earth. The line between life and a fiery end was now as thin as a single beam of steel. The planet itself, a wounded beast, was trying to shrug them off. In this war, speed was not an advantage. It was the only thing that separated the living from the dead. The very air they breathed was becoming a poison, compressed into a crushing force. It was the ultimate metaphor. Humanity, pushing back against a door that the world was trying to slam shut. For a brief moment, the will of 4 men was stronger than the pull of a planet. They had reached the heart of the beast, a dying, technological god on the verge of a tantrum. All plans, all theories become meaningless in the face of absolute chaos. The only thing left is to react. The doomsday clock was no longer a concept. It was a 15-minute reality. The enemy does not attack, it does not scheme. It simply is, and its weight is absolute. Even a skeleton of titanium has its limits, and they had just found it. The lesson was simple. Alone you break. Together you might just bend. Hope was now a small gap under a falling ceiling, and it rested on the shoulders of one man. A race against time, a race against physics, a race against extinction itself. The final seconds of a world, the last gasp of a dying machine. They were not holding up a beam, they were holding up the future, and it was costing them everything. The fate of a species decided by a single desperate pull of a lever. Sometimes, salvation is not a gentle act. It is a violent, roaring release of pressure. In the war against gravity, humanity could not win. But on this day, they had earned a draw. They had won the battle, but the war against the world itself would last forever. These were not the wounds of defeat. They were the scars of glory. They did not return with spoils of war. They returned with the gift of a tomorrow. This is the face of endurance. This is the face of a species that refuses to die. Up above, the world had not changed. It was still hostile. It was still heavy. Nature began to do what it does best: erase the mistakes of its dominant species. A final fiery farewell to the age of exploration, a star made of human dreams burning out. Decades pass like seasons, and with time comes change. And humanity adapted. They built a new civilization, not of towers reaching for the sky, but of roots clinging to the rock. This was the new human, shorter, stronger, broader, a creature designed not to fly, but to endure. For these children, the world was not broken. It was simply the way it had always been. Technology returned to its first principles: the power of the lever, the hammer, and the human will. History was rewritten. Evolution was no longer about the mind, but about the sheer resilience of the body. The gods of the past, the titans of steel and the wings of wood, were now just relics in a museum. How do you explain the concept of lightness to a people who have only ever known heavy? A word can be erased from a language, but can the instinct be erased from the soul? The deepest sadness is for a loss you cannot explain to those who have never known it. They lived closer to the ground than ever before, but perhaps they saw the stars more clearly. The moon hung in the sky, a silent, constant reminder of another world, with a gentler touch. Humanity had survived. The price of that survival was the sky. New legends were born, not of gods who flew in the heavens, but of heroes who battled in the deep. But somewhere deep in the code of their DNA, in the ghost of a forgotten memory, the question remained. Can you ever truly extinguish the desire to look up? Had humanity truly found its new, permanent place in the universe? Or was this chain temporary? Silence.